For decades, Angie Dickinson kept her silence while the world knew Johnny Carson as television's charming late-night king. But now at 93, the Hollywood legend finally speaks. Her words carry the weight of time, filled with fondness, regret, and unflinching honesty. This is her truth about the man behind the desk, the cameras, and the carefully crafted public image. You thought you knew Johnny Carson, the witty host who tucked America in at night for 30 years. But through Angie's eyes, a different man emerges. Stay with us. What she reveals will change how you see one of television's most enigmatic stars. In the pantheon of American television, few figures loom as large as Johnny Carson. For 3 decades, he was the last face millions saw before drifting off to sleep, his monologues the pulse of American culture. But what do we really know about the man who made us laugh, yet rarely laughed himself off camera? Who was Johnny Carson beyond the suits, the sidekicks, and the endless parade of guests? Angie Dickinson represents something equally profound in our cultural memory. From policewoman to Rio Bravo, she defied Hollywood's constraints on women, bringing intelligence and complexity to roles when female characters were often mere decoration. Their paths crossed repeatedly in an era when television was becoming the central hearth of American homes. Both were products of the Midwest, who became icons of coastal sophistication. But here's where it gets complicated. Their relationship, whatever its true nature, has remained largely unexplored. A footnote in the biographies of 2 extraordinary lives. What happens when a woman who has seen Hollywood from the inside finally decides, in her 9th decade, to speak about one of entertainment's most guarded personalities? This isn't merely celebrity gossip. It's a window into an entertainment era that shaped how we understand fame, gender, and power, told by one of the few witnesses still here to share it. Angeline Brown was born in Culm, North Dakota, on the 30th of September, 1931, the daughter of a printer and newspaper publisher. Her early years were marked by multiple moves, first to Edgeley, North Dakota, and eventually to Burbank, California, where the sunshine and proximity to studios would forever alter her trajectory. But Hollywood wasn't immediately calling. The young woman who would become Angie Dickinson graduated from Immaculate Heart College with a business degree and briefly worked as a secretary. In 1954, she placed second in a local beauty contest, catching the eye of a television producer who offered her a spot on The Jimmy Durante Show. It was her first taste of the camera's gaze, and she knew immediately she wanted more. Meanwhile, across the Midwest in Nebraska, John William Carson was born in 1925, a boy who discovered early that humor could be armor in connection. By age 14, he was performing magic tricks, calling himself the Great Carsoni. After a stint in the Navy during World War II, he found his way to radio and then local television in Omaha. In 1951, he moved to California, not far from where Angie was beginning to dream of a different life. Carson's first national television role came in 1953, as host of the game show Earn Your Vacation. The following year, he caught the attention of comedian Red Skelton, becoming his writer and occasional stand-in. When Skelton was injured before a show in 1954, Carson stepped in a seemingly small moment that would prove pivotal in television history. For both Angie and Johnny, the mid-negative 1,950 seconds were a time of becoming, of shedding their Midwestern origins and learning the unwritten rules of an industry that could crown you one day and forget you the next. By 1956, Angie Dickinson had caught the attention of Howard Hawks, who cast her opposite John Wayne in Rio Bravo, 1959, the role that would establish her as more than just a beautiful face. Her character, Feathers, was tough, smart, independent, qualities that would become Dickinson's trademark. The camera loved her not just for her beauty, but for the intelligence that animated her features, the subtle way she could command a scene with a glance. Carson's ascent was steadier, built night after night in the glare of live television. After hosting several daytime shows, he was chosen to replace Jack Paar as host of The Tonight Show in 1962. On the 1st of October of that year, with graying temples but youthful energy, he stepped onto the stage at 30 Rockefeller Plaza and into American living rooms. "I had no idea what to expect," Carson would later say of that first broadcast. "I just knew I couldn't be Jack Paar. I had to be myself. Inside NBC's Studio 6B, the pressure was immense. The lights were hot, the cameras unforgiving. Johnny would pace backstage, smoking, reviewing notes, rarely engaging with the crew or guests before the show. Ed McMahon, his longtime announcer, once described watching Carson prepare. He was like a fighter before a bout, focused, a little tense, conserving his energy for when it counted. By the mid-negative 1,960 seconds, both Angie and Johnny were becoming household names. Dickinson continued to build her film career with roles in The Killers, 1964, and Point Blank, 1967, projects that showcased her versatility. In 1974, she would reach a new level of fame as Sergeant Leanne Pepper Anderson in the groundbreaking series Policewoman, one of the first successful dramas with a female lead. Carson, meanwhile, had transformed The Tonight Show into a cultural institution. His monologues became a nightly barometer of American society, his interviews a masterclass in timing and wit. By 1972, when the show moved from New York to Burbank, Johnny Carson wasn't just a television host, he was the king of late night. And that's when their paths would cross in ways the cameras both captured and missed. The Tonight Show couch became America's most coveted seat for actors, musicians, and comedians alike. An appearance could launch a career or revive one fading into obscurity. For established stars like Angie Dickinson, it was an expected stop on the publicity circuit, a place to promote a film, discuss a television series, or simply maintain visibility in the ever-fickle entertainment landscape. Angie first appeared on Carson's Tonight Show in the mid-negative 1,960 seconds. The chemistry was immediately apparent. Johnny, known for his sometimes awkward demeanor with guests, seemed to relax in her presence. Their banter had an ease to it, a back and forth, that suggested both mutual respect and something that audiences sensed might run deeper. "You could cut the tension with a knife," recalled a Tonight Show staff member years later. Not negative tension, but that electric feeling when two people just click on camera. Over the next 2 decades, Dickinson would return to Carson's couch multiple times. Each appearance seemed to build on an inside joke, a shared history that viewers could sense but never fully access. Carson, typically restrained in his personal revelations, would occasionally let his guard down with Angie in ways that became part of Tonight Show lore. Off-camera, Hollywood in the 1,970 seconds was a complex tapestry of professional networks, social circles, and private relationships. Both Angie and Johnny moved through this world as celebrities who understood its unwritten rules. Both had navigated failed marriages. Dickinson, most notably to composer Burt Bacharach from 1,965 to 1,981, Carson to 3 different women over the years. Both understood the cost of fame and the value of privacy. The Los Angeles of that era revolved around a few key restaurants, clubs, and private homes where the entertainment elite could relax away from public scrutiny. The Polo Lounge at the Beverly Hills Hotel, Chasen's Restaurant, private gatherings at homes in Bel Air and Malibu. In these spaces, the lines between professional colleagues and personal B-Tom relationships often blurred. What no one saw coming was how long both Carson and Dickinson would keep the true nature of their connection private, and how decades later, Angie's perspective would offer a rare glimpse into one of entertainment's most guarded personalities. February 1976. Angie Dickinson walks onto the Tonight Show stage in a striking blue dress, her confidence evident in every step. She's riding high on the success of Policewoman, now in its 2nd season. The audience applauds enthusiastically. They know her. They like her. They've invited her into their homes weekly as the tough but compassionate Sergeant Pepper Anderson. Carson stands to greet her, his smile wider than usual. "You look wonderful," he says, kissing her cheek. It's a standard greeting, but viewers at home might notice he holds the moment a beat longer than necessary. What follows is 15 minutes of television that fans would recount for years. The conversation flows from her series to current events, but it's the unspoken current between them that captivates the audience. At one point, discussing a dramatic scene from Policewoman, Carson leans forward and says, "You know, you're actually a very good actress," which sometimes gets overlooked because of these? Dickinson interrupts, gesturing to herself with characteristic directness. The audience erupts in laughter. Carson, rarely flustered, actually blushes. I was going to say because you make it look so effortless, he recovers, but you've given them another reason to applaud. In the control room, the director signals to stay with the two-shot, capturing both faces in frame. There's gold happening here, the kind of genuine moment that can't be scripted. What the cameras don't catch is the brief conversation during the commercial break. Doc Severinson's band plays loudly, crew members adjust lighting, and in this bubble of semi-privacy, words pass between host and guest that no microphone records. A production assistant, who happened to be bringing water to the set, later recalled, I couldn't hear what they said, but I remember thinking it looked like two old friends catching up, or maybe more than friends. There was a comfort there, but also something careful in how they leaned away when the floor director started counting down to return from break. When the red light returns, they're back in their professional roles, host and guest, entertainer and audience. But something has shifted subtly. For the remainder of the interview, Carson's questions become more personal, more reflective. Are you happy, Angie? He asks near the segment's end, an unusually direct and intimate question for the typically reserved host. She pauses, considering. I'm getting there, she answers with a smile that suggests layers beneath the simple response. Carson nods, seeming to understand perfectly what she isn't saying. But here's where it gets complicated. The public, Carson, witty, charming, always in control, was a carefully constructed persona. Those who worked closely with him described a different man off camera, intensely private, often moody, and uncomfortable with emotional intimacy. He was, as his third wife Joanna Holland would later describe, the loneliest man I've ever known. Angie Dickinson, meanwhile, navigated Hollywood as a woman determined to protect her personal dignity in an industry that often reduced actresses to their physical attributes. Her 8-year marriage to Burt Bacharach had ended in 1981, leaving her a single mother to their daughter Nikki, who faced significant health challenges throughout her life. Their public interactions, those Tonight Show appearances that seemed so charged with unspoken history, existed in a complex context of professional obligations, public expectations, and industry politics. In those days, Dickinson would later reflect in a 2019 interview, there was no such thing as a casual relationship if you were in the public eye. Everything had consequences for your career, especially for women. Carson's well-documented personal life further complicated matters. By the mid-1970 seconds, he had already been divorced twice and would marry his third wife, Joanna Holland, in 1972. His reputation as a difficult romantic partner was growing. Friends described a man who could be charming at a dinner party but unreachable the next day, who required extensive alone time, who struggled with alcohol during his darkest periods. Johnny needed people desperately. His longtime producer, Fred de Cordova, once observed, but couldn't stand having them too close. Industry whispers about Carson's relationships with various actresses and models were common in Hollywood circles, though he maintained strict privacy about his personal life. When journalists probed, they met an impenetrable wall. Carson rarely granted in-depth interviews, and when he did, personal questions were explicitly off-limits. For Dickinson, navigating this terrain required careful consideration. As one of Hollywood's leading ladies who had fought to be taken seriously as an actress rather than just a sex symbol, any hint of impropriety could undermine decades of work. Moreover, she had her daughter to consider. Nikki's well-being remained her primary concern throughout her life. The question lingered in entertainment circles. What exactly was the nature of Angie Dickinson and Johnny Carson's relationship? Was it a brief romance kept private to protect their respective images? A deep friendship with moments of something more? A professional relationship amplified by on-screen chemistry and audience speculation? Off-camera, the story was different from what viewers might have imagined. While gossip columnists occasionally linked their names, both maintained public silence. When asked directly in a rare 1985 interview about her relationship with Carson, Dickinson deflected with practiced ease. Johnny and I have known each other. in a long time. In this business, that's valuable people who knew you before and after. The ambiguity would remain for decades until Angie, in her 90s, decided the time had come for clarity. As the 1,980 seconds progressed, both Carson and Dickinson saw their lives take divergent paths. Carson continued his reign on The Tonight Show, but his personal life remained turbulent. His third marriage to Joanna Holland ended in 1983, resulting in a reportedly massive $20 million settlement. He would marry once more in 1987 to Alexis Maas, a union that would last until his death. Angie's career transitioned as Hollywood's opportunities for women over 40 narrowed considerably. After Policewoman ended in 1978, she continued to work steadily in television, films, and occasional big-screen projects like Brian De Palma's Dressed to Kill, 1980. But the leading roles became less frequent, the industry's attention shifting to younger actresses. Their on-air reunions became less frequent too. By the late 1,980 seconds, Dickinson's appearances on The Tonight Show were occasional rather than regular events. Each time she returned, viewers could still sense that special rhythm between them, but there seemed to be a new distance as well, the weight of years and separate lives creating a subtle barrier. In a quiet moment never shared with the public until decades later, there was a phone call in 1991. Carson had announced his retirement from The Tonight Show after nearly 30 years. The entertainment world buzzed with tributes and retrospectives, with countless celebrities sharing their favorite Johnny moments. Angie called him at home, not his office at NBC, but his private line. Few people had that number. "I thought about sending flowers," she would later recall, "but that seemed too impersonal for all we'd been through." The call lasted nearly an hour. What exactly was said remains largely private, but Dickinson would eventually share one detail. "He told me he was tired, not just of the show, but of being Johnny Carson every night. He said, 'You always saw through it, Ang. That's what scared me.'" When Carson delivered his final monologue on the 22nd of May, 1992, Angie watched from her home in Beverly Hills. She was not among the special guests for his farewell episode, which featured Bette Midler and Robin Williams. Perhaps that was fitting. Their connection had always existed somewhat apart from the bright lights of public performance. After retirement, Carson retreated further into privacy. He all but disappeared from public view, declining countless interviews and appearance requests. He spent his days sailing on his yacht, the Serengeti, playing tennis, and occasionally sending jokes to David Letterman for use in his monologues. Dickinson continued working through the 1,990 seconds and early 2,000 seconds, appearing in films like Pay It Forward and making guest appearances on television series. She became increasingly selective about her projects and public appearances, focusing more on her daughter Nikki, whose health challenges had been a constant concern throughout her life. When Johnny Carson died on the 23rd of January 2005, at age 79, from complications related to emphysema, the tributes poured in from around the world. Former guests, fellow comedians, and television executives all shared their Johnny stories. Angie Dickinson made no public statement, and that's when everything changed. For 15 years after Carson's death, Angie Dickinson maintained her public silence about their relationship. Even as unauthorized biographies and retrospectives attempted to piece together Carson's complicated private life, she declined comment. When her name appeared in articles speculating about Carson's romantic history, she neither confirmed nor denied. The loss of her daughter Nikki to suicide in 2007 devastated Dickinson. She retreated from public life for a period, processing her grief privately. When she re-emerged for occasional interviews or appearances, she focused on her career legacy and charitable work, steering conversations away from personal matters. But as she entered her 90s, something shifted. Perhaps it was the perspective that comes with 9 decades of life, or the freedom of having outlived most of her contemporaries. In a series of interviews beginning in 2022, Dickinson began to open up about her life in ways she had previously avoided, including, finally, her relationship with Johnny Carson. At this age, she told a journalist for a profile in a major entertainment magazine, "I don't see the point in carrying secrets to the grave. Johnny's gone. Most of the people who might have been hurt are gone, and the truth is quieter than the headlines." In a televised interview that quickly went viral, the interviewer delicately broached the subject of Carson. Rather than her usual deflection, Angie paused, smiled slightly, and then nodded. "Yes," she said simply. "There was something between us, something important." What followed was not the salacious tell-all some might have expected, but rather a nuanced reflection on a complex relationship that spanned decades. According to Dickinson, she and Carson had indeed been romantically involved during the 1,970 seconds, though never exclusively and always with extreme discretion. "Johnny wasn't built for conventional relationships," she explained. "He needed space, enormous amounts of it, and I had my career, my daughter. We found a way to matter to each other without making demands neither of us could meet." She described Carson as brilliant, troubled, and incredibly kind in ways the public never saw. In one particularly moving anecdote, she revealed that when her daughter was hospitalized in 1976, Carson arranged for top specialists to consult on her case, covering the expenses anonymously. "He could never acknowledge his own goodness," she said. "That was part of his charm and his tragedy." When asked why she had kept their relationship private for so long, her answer revealed as much about Hollywood's power dynamics as it did about personal choices. "In those days, being linked to Johnny romantically would have overshadowed everything else about me professionally. I'd worked too hard to become Angie Dickinson, actress, to be reduced to Johnny's girlfriend, and he respected that completely," she added, with characteristic candor. "Besides, we both knew it wasn't forever. Johnny wasn't built for forever with anyone." What emerges from her revelations is not a headline-grabbing affair, but rather a thoughtful reflection on connection, privacy, and the complicated reality behind public personas. Not scandal, but humanity. In finally speaking about Carson, Angie Dickinson has done something remarkable. She has helped transform our understanding of one of entertainment's most enigmatic figures without diminishing him. Her recollections portray not the polished performer millions welcomed into their homes nightly, but a man of contradictions, charming yet distant, generous yet guarded, brilliant yet troubled. "Johnny carried so much loneliness," she reflected in her most extensive interview on the subject. "He made everyone laugh, but few people made him laugh. He connected with millions every night, but struggled to connect one-on-one. I think that's why our friendship mattered to him. I never needed him to be on." Her revelations invite us to reconsider not just Carson, but the entire entertainment landscape of that era. The 1,970 seconds represented a transitional period for Hollywood, when the studio system's rigid control was fading, but the intense scrutiny of today's social media environment hadn't yet emerged. In that liminal space, public figures navigated privacy and publicity in ways that seem almost unimaginable today. For women like Dickinson, the challenges were particularly acute. To succeed in Hollywood required threading an impossible needle, projecting sexuality without being reduced to it, showing strength without threatening male co-stars, aging gracefully in an industry obsessed with youth. That she managed all this while protecting her personal relationships and caring for a daughter with special needs speaks to an extraordinary resilience. You can almost see how these two Midwesterners, both transformed by fame, both wearing public masks, might have recognized something familiar in each other. Perhaps they provided each other a rare space where the performance could stop, however briefly. Dickinson's willingness to finally share her perspective on Carson also highlights changing attitudes about female agency and voice in Hollywood. In the era when their relationship occurred, the power to shape narrative belonged almost exclusively to men studio executives, network presidents, newspaper publishers. Women's stories, particularly about their private lives, were often sensationalized or silenced altogether. Now, in her 90s, Angie reclaims her own narrative. She decides which parts of her history to share and which to keep private. She contextualizes her experiences with wisdom earned over nearly a century of life. "People always want the scandal," she noted in a recent conversation. "But what Johnny and I shared was something else, complicated, imperfect, and real. That deserves respect, not gossip." Carson himself once said, "I can't say I was ever truly comfortable with fame. Perhaps in Angie Dickinson, he found someone who understood that discomfort intimately and accepted it as part of him rather than despite it. In her gentle but honest recollections, she gives us not the myth of Johnny Carson, television legend, but the legacy of Johnny Carson, human being. And in doing so, she cements her own legacy as not just a Hollywood beauty or groundbreaking actress, but as a woman of integrity, discretion, and profound empathy. When Angie Dickinson finally spoke about Johnny Carson after all these years, she didn't offer scandal or sensation. Instead, she gave us something more valuable: authenticity. Through her eyes, we glimpsed not just the late-night king, but the private citizen, complex, flawed, and deeply human. "I loved him in my way, and he loved me in his," she said recently, her voice strong despite her years. Neither of us needed to own the other. Maybe that's why we remained in each other's lives when so many other relationships faded. There's something poignant about Angie at 93, sitting in her living room surrounded by photographs spanning decades, finally feeling free to speak her truth, not with bitterness or regret, but with the clarity that comes from a life fully lived. Perhaps that's the most valuable thing she shares, not secrets about Johnny Carson, but the wisdom of understanding that our connections to others, complicated, imperfect, and often unclassifiable, are what make a life rich. What moment in this story resonated with you most? The quiet phone call before his retirement? The behind-the-scenes kindness that never made headlines? Or simply the grace of two people who found something real in an industry built on illusion? Share your thoughts in the comments below.